everyone, and welcome to the Office of Community Services Block Grantee Customer Satisfaction Report webinar. This is Janelle, the Executive Director of NASCAS, and we are pleased to co-host this webinar with OCS today. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. These are on mute. Any questions during the webinar, please use the chat option on the webinar tool. The toolbar on the right-hand side of your screen, see a text box where you can type questions. Please choose all analysts when sending your questions. We will be responding to all questions received at the end of the presentation. Also, please note we will be recording this webinar, and a copy of today's webinar will be posted at the NASCAS website. At this time, I'd like to turn things over to Janelle George, the Acting Director of OCS, to highlight some key points of today's webinar and introduce the panelists.
Thank you, Renee. Thank everyone for joining us today for the webinar. As you know, OCS has utilized the ACSI as a tool for ensuring our state and federal accountability as a part of our CSGB performance management framework. And the good news is that we have some positive results, and we've reached positive results through our cooperative efforts across the network. We're at a point now where we are really headed in the right direction, and in fact, you'll hear today how we're actually headed on an upward trajectory regarding our accountability. OCS is really pleased to be able to speak with you today, and we want to be able to note some of the improvements that we have made through the ACSI, both on the part of the state as well as OCS. Some of the things that you are going to hear today regarding the ACIS will be in regards to what we consider to be our two drivers of improved satisfaction. And key drivers have been in the areas of monitoring as well as technical assistance by federal staff. We really feel like it's important to keep this momentum going that we have started thus far, and we want to make sure that we are working to continue and improve upon our efforts. So OCS is really committed to making sure that we do just and putting forth extra effort towards continuous improvement. And what we will be doing is using the results from the survey to develop action plans for the key drivers that I mentioned, monitoring and technical assistance. These are our key drivers of customer satisfaction. What I'd like to do now is to turn over to Ms. Kelly Stellard, who is the Program Director at CFI Group. She's going to lead this debriefing on the ACSI Grantee survey, and I will turn over to you, Kelly.
Thank you much. Welcome, everyone. I'm pleased to here to talk about the survey results. Just to start on slide 2, it's a table of contents, our agenda for all intents and purposes today. I'm going to start out by giving a little bit of an introduction and background about the CFI group and our methodology. I'm going to walk through some definitions that we're going to talk about throughout the presentation, just to set the scene and get everybody on the same page. Talk through the program overview and the methodology, how we fielded this. We'll go through an executive summary, talk about some of the successes that were alluded to earlier. We'll look specifically at the Customer Satisfaction Index results, and look specifically at some of the drivers and some of the attributes that we measured with respect to the program. So in terms of the history of the CFI Group, CFI was founded in 1988. Our founder, Dr. Klaus Fernell, was also the founding partner of the ACSI organization. That's the American Customer Satisfaction Index organization. They measure customer satisfaction both in the public and private sector and provide benchmarking opportunities for both. This methodology was developed in concert with the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan, and it's cause and effect methodology. And the beauty of that is it actually allows us to not only identify the drivers of satisfaction, what's important, but also how important each of those are so that you can prioritize your limited resources and really do around the areas that are going to cost or give you the biggest bang for your buck with respect to customer satisfaction, the things that are really going to move the needle. We are a professional services company. Many of us have more than 20 years of experience. We serve a global list of clients out of 5 offices over 3 continents, and really are proud of the fact that we provide actionable results. We don't just provide a customer satisfaction rating and then tell you to go figure out how to change it or how to improve it. We do provide you with more information about how to prioritize and what to do next. In our definitions, first term that I'm going to talk about is Customer Satisfaction Index. And this is really the linchpin of our whole methodology. The Customer Satisfaction Index is actually based on 3 questions. How satisfied you are with the services provided by OCS as it relates to CSGB. How well do the services from meet your expectations, and how do the services from OSC compare to the ideal grant awarding agency? Each of these questions ask on a 1 to 10 scale. We convert those numbers to a 0 to 100, average them together, and that makes the Customer Satisfaction Index. That is really the number that can be benchmarked both in the public and private sector because it's common across all folks that use the ACSI methodology. A little bit about drivers of satisfaction. And basically what drivers of satisfaction mean is it's the different aspects of the customer experience that we measure. We measure for this particular program training and technical assistance by the OCS-funded providers, monitoring and corrective action, and technical assistance of the offered by the OCS staff, communication, plan review acceptance, data collection analysis, and reporting. For these drivers of satisfaction, we ask a number of different questions. They're on a 10-point scale and calculated similar to the Customer Satisfaction Index. The term that I introduced is future behaviors. And future behaviors are really the things that are important to an organization and the reason why they pay so much attention to customer satisfaction. So in this particular study, there are 2 that we measure. One is how confident you are that OCS is fulfilling its mission of supporting the states in efforts to help individuals with low incomes out of poverty. The one is how much do you trust OCS to work with you to meet your organization's needs. The idea is if you do a job with customer satisfaction, you do a great job here with the future behaviors. As satisfaction goes up, these future behaviors and these relationships will strengthen. The behavior scores are calculated very much like the satisfaction index and the driver scores. The 2 questions are asked on a 10-point scale. They're converted to a 100-point scale and then averaged to give you the future behavior score. The definition I have for you is impacts. Impacts derive from a statistical analysis of the relationship between the drivers and satisfaction. This is really what the science of the ACSI methodology allows us to do. An important piece of the puzzle here because it is the key to informing prioritization. I'll talk to you a little bit more about it later on because it's easier when the whole method, or excuse me, the whole model is up on the screen. But this is a particularly important definition. Confidence interval is basically a range around a sample score that is likely to contain the true population. For the study, the confidence level is 90% and the rate is 4.7 plus or minus. About our score, CSGB recommends that the scores be viewed on a continuum and that each organization use the results to identify strengths and areas of opportunity. We often get the question, you know, X, is that good, is that bad? Because it's on a 1 to 100-point scale, a lot of people like to look at and remember how it worked when they were in grade school, where 70s were average and 80s and so on. But we like to point out that that's not necessarily a good comparison. We have 3 questions that go to the satisfaction index. One of those is a comparison to an ideal situation. Because that's a pretty high bar. When you ask people how satisfied they are, as well as how well their expectations were met, and how well their experience compared to an ideal, that's asking, that's setting some pretty strong criteria in terms of how they feel about their experience. As such, the scoring tends a little bit less than what you might expect if you were looking towards a grade or an average. So what we say is anything between 60 and 69 is considered average. 70 to 79 is pretty good. Excellent is 80 to 89, and 90 to 100 is what we consider exceptional. And just to provide some perspective, we find very few either public or private entities that ever reach in the 90s. It's a very high bar. Also, to provide some perspective, the overall average for the 2017 Customer Satisfaction Index for the federal government was reported at a 69.7. It's actually an improvement. So things are moving forward with the federal government, but as you see, they're just on the cusp of the good. A little program overview, some information about our methodology. The survey was fielded October 17th through November 14th, 2017. We did send out 3 survey reminders to make sure that we got plenty of response. The objective of the study was basically to measure grantee satisfaction and help with target setting for the federal accountability measures. We're looking to identify key areas of improvement so you could use them to go forward and continue to improve satisfaction. 50 were sent out, 45 were completed, which is an excellent response rate of 81.8. Really very good. We usually around 20 to 30% response rate, so 81 is outstanding. About the 2017 successes, and there were a number of great ones that we noted. First of all, the CSI score improved 4 points from 58 to 62 in 2017. Improvement was based on higher scores for all 3 of the metrics that are used to measure the customer satisfaction. So overall satisfaction was up 5 points, satisfaction relative to the expectations was up 3, and ideal measure was up 4 points. So very good positive there. Score grant monitoring improved 15 points from 47 to 62 in 2017. Outstanding, it really is. Clarity of feedback was up 18 points. Relevance of procedures was up 16 points, and usefulness of visit was up 16 points as well. This really based on a lot of hard work. I know this was an area that you guys had focused on, and it certainly showed in terms of the response and the feedback that we got in 2017. Performing and technical assistance by OCS staff improved 5 points to 60. Ability to direct to useful resources and the ability to answer questions improved 9 points respectively. Success, grantees report a greater level of trust in OCS, up 6 points. So those future behaviors. So we've got satisfaction going up, we've got some key drivers that are going up, and again, we've got that future behavior going up. So very good positive results for 2017. Now we'll talk about some specific key findings and some specific areas and some suggestions for improvement. So monitoring, you guys did a great job in terms of improving that, but it still is the 3rd lowest driver satisfaction in terms of score at 62. And it's among the higher impact drivers, which makes it an important area for focus continuing forward. Time feedback and clarity of assistance provided remain the areas that we heard frustration from grantees. When we took a look at the verbatim comments, some of the information we learned was just some of them simply are not being monitored, and said that it was just taking a really long time to get their reports. And so some of the recommendations we have, or some suggestions that we provided here, have specifically to do with those monitoring reports. So one of the items that we mentioned is consider handheld devices such as tablets to document monitoring visits and to write draft reports while they're in progress, just to get some notes down and get that process moving quicker. That might help. If they're not currently in use, the development of standardized report formats that can facilitate consistent and efficient documentation process so that the reports can be provided shortly following the visit is another suggestion we had. If there are standardized reports, we suggest reviewing and assessing the value of the information required and work to streamline those so that the reports aren't so cumbersome and time-consuming to complete. In addition, once you work towards improving some of the things, we just encourage you to establish and communicate timeframes for releasing grant monitoring reports. So some expectations so that people know that they should be getting those reports out quicker, and the grantees are and it's important to them to receive them, and just making sure that that's a focus. Also, as you make progress in this area, communicating the results, communicating the new expectations that are being sent to the grantees, so they know that you're listening to their feedback and that you're responding, is super important, because as we continue to survey them and ask them for their feedback, it's particularly important that they know that their feedback is being taken serious and that you're take action to make things better. Training and tech OCS staff is the next kind of key area that we wanted to take a look at. This is one of the lowest scoring satisfaction scores also at 60. With an impact of 1, it's a pretty large impact. Of the technical assistance, as well as the training and the responsiveness of the staff, are all scoring below 60. And so that's definitely an area that we'd want to take a look at in terms of action plans going forward. Again, look at the verbatim comments to kind of understand what's behind some of those ratings. Folks identified gaps in knowledge, areas that needed training up. They also talked about timely response to training requests. And certainly would recommend that you assess the processes and procedures for tracking and following up on requests, and make sure that they are not going unanswered. We have people that even indicated, not only did they get a late response, but they didn't get any response at all. So when reaching out for training, it's really important that you at least acknowledge their request and try and respond to it as timely as possible. From here, look more specifically at some of the survey results. On this slide, we show the customer satisfaction index and all of the metrics that go into that. As we can see, all of them up, as we talked about, up 4 points for the customer satisfaction index, and all 3 of the metrics have improved as well. There's a lot of information on it, but it is the satisfaction model, and I'll talk you through each of the pieces and describe how they relate to each other, and I think everyone will understand when I'm done. So we'll start over at the left-hand side. Start with the drivers of satisfaction. So I explained what those are. Those are actually the different elements of the customer experience that we measure. Far left, there are the circles. Those have scores, and then those are actually the driver scores. And those are the based on the questions that we ask about the specific driver areas. Them are the impacts. I talked a bit about the impacts. Those are the things that really help you zero in on what you should be prioritizing. And so in relative terms, the higher impacts are the 1.4 down to 0.2. They're all relative. Nothing is unimportant here, but you are supposed to look at the impacts and find the things that are the highest impact, because they're the ones that are going to help you improve customer satisfaction the most. So without the impacts, you might look at the data and say, we scored 55 for data collection, where we should put all our effort. Based on the impacts here, you want to look at a lower satisfaction number along with a high impact, and that points us right to grant monitoring. With a 62 and 1.4, that's definitely the key driver that you want to pay most attention to. And I think that played out in the way that you've approached customer satisfaction since 2015. Satisfaction score is in the middle at 62, and then we have the future behaviors over to the right. To the right of future behaviors are the future behavior scores at 66 and 64, and then to them are those impacts, and those impacts are actually how much importance the satisfaction index has, or how much the satisfaction index drives those future behaviors. So the way it works is, if you take a look at the drivers of satisfaction, if you were to improve grant monitoring from a 62 to a 67, up 5 points, then you would expect your customer satisfaction index to increase 1.4. If you increase your customer satisfaction by 5 to 67, then you expect your trust in the OCS to meet state needs to increase by 5.6 points. The model is you really can understand how drivers impact customer satisfaction and how customer satisfaction impacts future behaviors. And you prioritize based on the scores and the impacts to make sure that you're moving in the direction you want to, and you're getting your biggest return on investment when you make plans to change and improve. Skip on to slide 21 here. This is a priority matrix, and basically it provides sort of a bird's eye view of all of the different drivers of satisfaction and kind of where they fall out based on their performance score and their impact. So the component scores or the driver scores are up the side, and the impacts are across the bottom. And basically this breaks up the matrix into quadrants. At the top, you have the higher scoring, higher priority drivers, training and technical assistance funded by providers. That's the highest scoring driver that we have, and it's also a very high priority. So that's considered a strength. When we look down to the bottom right-hand corner, these are the top priorities because they're low than average scores and they're higher than average impact. So monitoring, as we talked about, and technical assistance provided by the OCS staff. We've got education kind of right there in the middle, kind of average impact, average score. Over to the left, we've got plan and review acceptance, a little higher than average score, but a lower impact. So something you certainly want to maintain because you're doing really well in it, but not an area that you want to place a lot of resources because you just won't get as much improvement in customer satisfaction. And then over in the left, data collection, with areas of concern, that the score would be certainly get your attention, but it's not something that you'd want to focus on necessarily because of the very low impact. Look more specifically at the customer satisfaction drivers. And then we have all of them listed here. We have the customer satisfaction index at the top, and then you can see all of the drivers of customer satisfaction and the scores relative to 2015. As you can see, grant monitoring is the key where you had a statistically significant improvement. The other areas stayed pretty close, no statistically significant differences. Some of them were a little bit up, some of them were a little bit down. Also, when you look at the future behaviors, confidence in OCS stayed about even. Trust in OCS was up about 6 points. It's sort of a broad picture of all of the different drivers. Next, we'll look specific to drivers and what kinds of questions we ask about each of them. So starting out with grant monitoring, again, we had that statistically significant improvement, and that was really driven by two attributes that we measured: relevance of procedures and usefulness of visit. Both of those were up statistically significant. We had some improvements across some of the other attributes that were measured: usefulness of visit, clarity of feedback, usefulness of feedback, and so on. The two areas that seem to still require a lot of attention is the clarity of assistance and the timeliness of feedback. We'll talk a bit more about that as we go forward. Right now, though, we did a special analysis with respect to grant monitoring, and Kate's going to tell you a little bit about how that turned out.
Good afternoon, everyone. So this is Kate Blunt, and I work at ACSI kind of with a hypothesis, trying to figure out how, if there was any difference among the 12 states who were monitored between 2015 and 2017, i.e. between the first survey and the second survey, if there are any differences in how viewed grant monitoring and in their satisfaction, both from 2015 to 2017, and also among that group versus the rest of the states. So CFI did a quick analysis, or did a thorough analysis, and there was some interesting data which I thought you all would find valuable. So if you think of the group of 12, which were the 12 agencies that were monitored, the states that were monitored in 2016 and 2017, think about their grant monitoring score. That jumped from 2015 to 2017 from a score of 42 to 71, a 29-point jump, which is quite a jump, and says something about the fact monitoring was viewed more positively. Their CSI, their satisfaction score for that group also increased from 66 to 73 between 2015 and 2017, so also a significant improvement. The second piece of data that we looked at, we compared the group of 12 with the rest of the states, and the group of 12 scored 13 points higher grant monitoring than the rest of the states. So if you were monitored, you had a better perception of this than if you were not. So the score was a difference of 71 versus 58. Also, there is a 14-point difference, 14 points higher customer satisfaction among those 12 states versus the rest. So that gives us an indication, or I think reinforces the concept that monitoring is very important. It drove the increase in satisfaction. Certainly is something that we will continue to focus on. Turn it back to Kelly.
Very good. So on the slide, we have open-ended questions in the survey. This allows them to just provide some additional feedback. And the folks that responded to the survey did a great job. I would encourage everybody to take a look at those open-ended responses because they didn't just fill in a couple of questions. As you can see here, they really did provide some lengthy, well-thought-out responses. And with respect to the question about what kind of suggestions they have for improving monitoring process, time reports. So we saw when we did performance on a closed-ended question, we asked them to rate it on a 10-point scale. They gave a low rating there. When we come to open-ended questions, they reinforce that by saying we really need those reports in a timely manner. So that's clearly an area that focused on and will provide some levels of satisfaction if they see improvements in the coming years. Next, assistance provided OCS-Funded providers. Again, it's one of those higher scoring of satisfaction at 74. It's slightly lower than it was in 2015, but that's not a statistically significant decline. Many of the drivers or many of the specific attributes, associated with this driver were very comparable to 2015. Knowledge of trainers was exactly the same at 80. Others were up, down a couple of points, but nothing dramatic. Of course, cost of training was the lowest rated, but accessibility training is also another area that's, in relative terms, rated lower. But overall, this is a strength of the program, and just keep up the good work in this particular area. Assistance provided by OCS. As we indicated, this is another area that could use some help. With an impact of 1 point, which is a higher impact, and a low score of 60, even though it's improved, this is an area that can be looked at and worked on a bit. Specifically, effectiveness of training and responsiveness staff, effectiveness of assistance are the lower rated attributes, and some areas that you might want to consider when putting together plans for improvement. Responsiveness of staff is up, as well as effectiveness of assistance, but still below 60 and still areas that offer opportunity. Again, any questions about this particular training? And some of the specific comments we heard were with respect to Roma Next Gen, as well as just some knowledge and experience of the folks that are providing the training so that they can understand nuances and the differences among states and their eligible entities in the national network. So lots of good information in the open-ended responses around this, and I would encourage you again to take a look at some of those as you start to develop plans to improve in this particular area. I think that the grantees have provided some great recommendations or suggestions for that. Communication is the next driver line to look at. And remember, in the priority map, it was kind of right square in the middle. So it's got about an average impact, about an average score at 63. We don't see a lot of difference between the 2015 and 2017 scores. Some of them look like they're a little bit lower, some a little bit higher, but nothing statistically significant. The two areas that score lowest are the timeliness of the information and the frequency of communication. So areas that I would suggest taking a look at if you're looking to improve communication, which is certainly an area that would be good in terms of impacting customer satisfaction, and those are the areas that I would suggest looking at going forward. Excuse me. A question with respect to communication, and some of the comments that we heard were, regular funding updates, more timely information. Timely seems to be an important theme throughout, and lots of people asking for best practices sharing. So those are some of the kinds of things that they would like communicated to them. Next, review and acceptance. This particular area fell our maintain in the priority map because it's relatively high scoring, a relatively low impact. For this particular driver satisfaction, the overall driver score is down just a bit. Most of the attributes down as well. Ease of submitting was just a little higher, but I want to draw your attention to the consistency of feedback because that's down significantly from 73 to 62. That's an area I certainly flag. This is an area where we say you're doing well, you want to maintain, and when you see areas like that where you have a statistically significant downturn, you might want to take a look at that and just make sure that you know what's going on there and you can make any adjustments that you need to. Plan review and acceptance, the open-ended question that we asked around that was, how would you OCS improve the process for submitting the plan to OCS? And there were several different suggestions made. Webinars were one of the areas that they thought would be very good. And basically any kind of instruction or clarification and simplification of the whole process. Things like frequently asked questions and checklists and anything that would simplify the process came across in the open-ended responses. So again, take a look at those. Maybe some good ideas that you can use to implement. Action analysis and reporting. This was that bottom quadrant, the lowest scoring, but also has the lowest impact. So in relative terms, it won't have as much impact on customer satisfaction if you were to improve here. On the other hand, ease of use data analysis, that scored under 50 and warrant some review in terms of what's going on there and if there aren't some areas that could be improved. Data analysis and reporting. When we ask an open-end about the annual report, some of the comments that we received are develop a solution for states to upload data to a system, instructions and training on how to instructions provided prior to implementation, and then simplify, simplify, simplify. The whole idea that make it as easy and just the amount of work to help people get the annual report done and submit on time. They're just looking for a less cumbersome product overall, I believe. Usually offer our respondents a couple of opportunities just to share open-endedly what they feel about a particular program. So in this case, we ask, what more could OCS do to help states meet the needs of low-income people with incomes? Comments like OCS feels disconnected from the local issues. Us live in our world for a few days, not to monitor, but to understand how poverty looks across the country. I thought it was kind of an interesting comment. Some of the others had to do with the need for more staff, consistent communication. Again, this gave them an opportunity to sort of just help provide feedback in terms of how they're feeling, and I think you'll find some of the comments really interesting. The last we ask is there anything else you want to comment? And I just want to out that, take a look at those because there were some really positive comments in there as well. Lots of constructive criticism. I think that the folks took the survey process very seriously, and it's as though they really believe you guys are interested in their opinions and willing to do something about it, because otherwise you don't get a 80% response rate. You don't see the kind of movement that you guys saw in your scores. But take a look, because there are quite a pats on the back in these open-ended comments. And this one right here that says, thank you for the opportunity to comment. I wanted to add a comment that addresses our appreciation to the CSGB team, OCS. As a fellow government worker, I recognize that often our efforts and personal commitment to the people and the purposes we serve are overlooked. And it goes on to talk, very positively about the colleagues and the impact that they're having. So, again, some bit of feedback overall on the program, some great progress in the schools, and I think some good specific suggestions for moving forward. Overall, I think you guys should feel really, really good about this 2017 results, and look forward to being able to take them to the next level. I think you guys have done a good job so far, and I think if you take this stuff really seriously, you'll be surprised at what you can accomplish.
Thank you. To remind everyone that if you have any questions, now's the time to enter them into the chat function. And I want to thank Kelly, Kate, and OCS for starting this process and taking us into a deeper dive, understanding the content and the information that's been submitted, and also understanding, where are we going to go with this in the future. So I'd also like to see if OCS has any follow-up additional comments they would like to add.
I just was going to say that we do very much value all of both the constructive nature of the input, and we are talking at the upcoming NASCAP conference, and then as a follow-up about all the work we're going to be doing in terms of our approach, in terms of work plans, and particularly with drivers of customer satisfaction. I'm particularly pleased that areas that we've seen the progress have been areas that are directly affected by the individual efforts of staff here in OCS who've been committed to showing improvements, and recognize that in some cases we are going from a place where we have significant room for improvement. So some of the early scores and prior things like tennis and other things are particularly we had nowhere to go but up, I guess there's a way to say, in some of those. But we've making great progress, and we're excited at the upcoming to share some additional news about the progress we're making on things like cleanness of our monitoring feedback, progress in our monitoring approach, OCS, but also in CSGB, and I'm very particularly pleased again to see that they're making progress in the quality and the overall training and technical assistance by our staff. These things don't necessarily turn around overnight, and it takes a while to change perceptions. But we feel like we're, as Janelle George indicated at the beginning, we're building momentum in the right direction, and we want to continue that effort.
Hi, this is Bill Baltic. I just wanted to add to what Seth had in regards to one of the items on the ACSI survey that went down, and that was I think consistency of the feedback for the state plan review. So we had some glitches with our system we're going to correct going forward. Actually, we had a meeting with the Office of Grant Management today for our OLDC system. We actually had viewed all of the plans for our deadline and for feedback, but in some cases, some of the feedback, there was some technical glitches with that. We have caused score to adjust onward. So we are aware of that, and we're making modifications to make sure that doesn't happen in the future. Thanks.
So we've not received any questions. Just one last chance in case you want to submit something. I do want to thank our OCS partners for not only starting this process, but taking a look at what solutions could be made, strategies to have in place, and for continuing this conversation at our NASCAS conference next week. We had a majority of states on this webinar, and we will, again, be posting this to our NASCAS website as a recorded webinar as well as the slides. So if you have additional follow-up or questions, please reach out to your OCS specialist. Thank you so much. Great afternoon.